working. So my name is Alex Page. I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, so that's northern Arizona, up by the mountains up here. And I work for W.L. Gore and Associates. You may have heard of us through some of our brand names like Gore-Tex, but we're a material science company. I was born in Oldham, UK, but I lived most of my life between Houston, Texas, and Seattle, Washington. Graduated from the University of Washington in 2019 from the Chemical Engineering Department. And my current role at W.L. Gore and Associates is as a process engineer for our vascular graft product line. And here I basically perform experimentation aimed at validating things like raw materials, equipment, processes. I develop, originate, and review technical documentation for review by global regulatory bodies, while also supporting and defending that work and that content in audits by those same regulatory bodies. And on top of that, I support ongoing manufacturing and continuous improvement, including things like new product development and upgrades to our processes overall. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. There's just a quick question from the audience. If you want, the Zoom link is on Canvas if it's easier for you, or it's just more robust right now to join via Zoom and have your headphones on and listen that way. You can also do that. I realize this is hard to hear. Like I said, I'm not confident IT is going to get back to me in this time period to be able to get the audio projected through the room, but we'll get it resolved before the next session. Okay, Cayen, do you want to go next on introducing yourself and giving a brief overview?
Yeah. So my name is Cayen Panlilio. I'm currently based in Marlborough, Massachusetts. I grew up in Washington and went to school in Washington, so pretty much was on the West Coast for majority of my life. I work for Cytiva currently, and then up until recently, I was a part of Paul Corporation, specifically working with their custom system solutions. So in that role, I got to do a lot of proposal work, URS evaluations, getting to talk with the customer a lot, and design a system, primarily tangential flow filtration, a lot of filtration systems for a lot of downstream operations. I got to talk with a lot of customers and work with a lot of different groups, I guess you could say. So that's been a fun experience. I also got to dip my hands into a lot of electrical automation, like PLCs and everything. It's been a very, very interesting growth journey, I would say, compared to, what we learn in class and stuff. So I'm excited to talk to you all.
Thanks, Cayen. Cayen also had an interesting set of career transitions from her first job to Cytiva. So if you have questions about starting in one industry and moving to another industry in like the first few years after graduation, she'd be great to follow up with on that. All right, Alex from BMS. We were just talking about BMS the other day, so I think everybody will be excited to hear from you.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
I've turned the computer around to maybe get more projection of this very minimal speaker system, so maybe.
All right. You guys can hear me, right?
Better.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Good.
So, hi everyone. My name's Alex, and I'm currently with Bristol Squibb in New Brunswick, New Jersey. This is New Brunswick site is our you can call it the research headquarters. So I came to the States in 2012. Went directly to Washington, Seattle, and then got my bachelor's degree in ChemE in 2016. And then I went to Houston, University of Houston. Also got my PhD in chemical engineering as well. So during my PhD, my thesis was mostly in protein purification and protein analytics. And I got a chance to work heavily with Cytiva systems. Funny enough, but after I graduated, in my third year, I got an internship opportunity with Regeneron. That's also when the COVID hits, and I was very fortunate not to be cut by the team during that time, where everything was shut down. And then right after my graduation, I was able to get a job at Bristol Squibb within the sterile product development group. My current role right now covers macromolecule analytics and analytical method development, all the way from preclinical stage, which means the studies in animal models, and all the way to commercialization stage. the current role that I'm in is a little bit different from my PhD thesis, but I think it both revolves around chemical engineering fundamentals and protein analytics. So it's been a very interesting experience for me. So I'm very excited to share with you all.
Thanks, Alex. I'm going to pick up on some of the threads just to get us started. So I think one of the things that comes up often with students that we get asked about as faculty is there's always seems to be a big barrier to moving into health and medicine fields. And both Alex's, you mentioned kind of how you got interested and sort of what your starting point was. And Alex Page, you did a bachelor's degree and then went into Gore. And Alex Zhu, you did a PhD. Can y'all kind of talk about what did you do during your undergraduate that best prepared you for going into this career field, like this career area? And particularly, can you talk about like the decision to go straight into this area, Alex Page, immediately with a bachelor's degree? Was there any consideration at any point in time about getting another degree? And Alex Zhu, if you can also talk about what you do as a PhD afterwards, that would be great. And what required you to get a PhD to do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As far as what got me interested, it was very much word of mouth exposure, essentially. Like I didn't actually have a lot of focused interest in healthcare. I think at the time that the career fair came around that I ended up getting introduced to Gore at, I was taking Professor your physio transport class. And so I would say transport phenomenon as like a whole was probably my favorite topic overall. And combining or connecting the dots between, just the fundamental ChemE transport phenomena classes and some of the physiological stuff kind of made me go, this might actually be more interesting than I had previously thought. But it wasn't until I started to talk to the people at Gore and some of the first people I was exposed to and do the actual research into their medical products division that I realized, a lot of the fluid flow, like, content that we went over was very applicable to the healthcare field overall, and it sounded pretty cool, especially with a lot of the bioavailable materials or bio compatible materials that they were dealing with at the time. And so it became an emerging interest of mine at the time. And then the more I researched it, the more I kind of got into the demographics that we were aiming for, and the actual patient populations we were supporting. And my alternate path at the time was paper mill work. And while that was very cool, big, and like grandiose, it didn't seem to have as much of an impact on like individuals as I wanted to have. And that is what kind of led me down that path.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. We'll circle back to the career fair because I'm sure there'll be questions about that. Alex, do you want to talk about like were you motivated to get a PhD to go into healthcare and medicine, or did you get a PhD for other reasons? Because this is a common question that comes up of, do you need a PhD to do the jobs in the area that you're working in?
Of course. So I knew I wanted to do something related with healthcare even before I started college, because my grandmother was a Chinese medicine doctor, and then my granddad was a chemical engineer. So from both of their standpoints, they taught me that it's really a stable area if you work in healthcare, because people always getting sick. I know it's kind of a dark reason, but people always get sick. There's always need for medicine. But my first choice for majoring when I started college was actually biomedical engineering, but I wasn't able to get into that department, and ChemE was my second option. And later I realized that ChemE is such a versatile major that you can do a lot of things from, say, cosmetics, and then oil and refinery, and healthcare. So my background is a little bit different, because as an international student, not a whole lot of companies will sponsor you if you just got a bachelor's degree. And also for a bigger pharma company like BMS, it's I would say it's very they discriminate against degrees. So after I got my PhD, my starting role is called a scientist title. But for people with, say, bachelor's or master's degree, you started off as associate scientist, and then fortunately for BMS, there's a track for you to go from those roles to a scientist role, where a fresh PhD can directly get after graduation. But it takes longer, like 5 to 6 years. But even for some other companies, it is not possible. They do not provide that track if you don't have a PhD degree. You can work for 30, 40 years and you won't get that title just like a fresh PhD. So for both of these reasons, I had to get a PhD right after I got my bachelor's. But it's not that I don't want to do a PhD and I got forced to do it. For PhD, you can work with some cutting edge technologies and then develop yourself and your skill sets, and then accommodate yourself to real world. And I know there are a lot of resources to help you to transition from academia to industry. There's a myth that PhDs are trained to be in academic field. It is true to some extent, but you also got a lot of opportunities, whether from your school or your connections and your professors, to go to industry. It's definitely It's definitely doable.
And I imagine for both of you, for both Alexes, you probably also interact a lot with PhDs and bachelors, depending on kind of which division and which group, that like technical group you're working with as well. And Cayen, I'm sure you've seen that at Cytiva. We'll leave this as the last question from me, and then we'll hand it over to everybody and the audience. Cayen, you specifically had this transition of your first year. So you did research in my lab, which thank you. That was awesome. She was one of our founding undergraduates, just for everybody in the audience, in the lab. So you started in kind of a health medicine area, and then you worked with Emisol for about a year, I think. And then you moved into more of the sort of bio space. What can you talk about kind of that process? Like what led you to get that type of job immediately after undergrad? How did you then make that transition? I think there's a question on Slido about like what skills did you find were transferable as well to working in the life sciences after working at Emisol. If you could just kind of talk us through your process, that would be great.
Yeah. So around the time that I started, well, when I graduated, I didn't have a job lined up for graduation, and one of the opportunities that ended up presenting itself was through, I think, Emisol was brought up through the counselor and everything. And when we were discussing the position, it sounded interesting to me because there was a lot of simulation work that you could do with MATLAB, and MATLAB's a pretty nifty tool, I'm sure, as you guys know. And I spent about a year doing that work, and I liked it, but I found it kind of not rewarding in a sense of I think Alex mentioned, you're not, it doesn't feel like I'm having a direct impact on someone's life. I was looking for that kind of fulfillment in my work, and I knew I wanted to move into the biotech space. I just wasn't exactly sure how to go about it. You could say that my work at Emisol was me kind of exploring okay, maybe I could work in a different industry, or I can try out some of these skills that I've learned in my undergraduate and see how I can build that up. I would say transitioning from that into my next role, which was a process development assistant at a biotech startup. They like that I did it, but I don't think there was any direct transfer. I mean, when you're working in a lab, sometimes you can analyze the data in certain ways, depending on how you're developing the process. Because in that lab specifically, they were doing a lot of scale up work with tangential flow filtration equipment, chromatography systems and stuff like that. But I didn't really directly use anything from my first role when I started working there. In that role is where I actually picked up a lot of my skills that I kind of use in this current role that I have right now. I would say that a lot of the things that I learned were on the job. I think I'm a very hands-on learner myself, and I know you can get a lot from reading papers, but really getting to work in a lab, especially there was a downstream lab and an upstream lab right next to each other. So I could go back and forth, and if they needed help anywhere, I would just jump in and they'd teach me it. And it's a very, I would say, compact industry. Now that I'm kind of bouncing between states when I travel from work, I'm oh, hey, like, I know you, or like, we've talked before, like, oh, hey, like, nice to see you again. So it is very, like, once you get your foot in the door, I think it's a lot easier to kind of evaluate where you might want to be in the field, because there are a lot of different positions.
And that's one thing I think we see quite a bit, is that people can move around once they're in the biotech industry, especially because companies get bought out. You know, the field changes quite a bit, the market can change, and so that can change kind of where people's expertise and specialties can go. All right, I'm gonna just check with the audience behind me to see if anybody has any questions that they want to ask here. Otherwise, we've got some Slido questions, but I also want to give a chance to anybody that's out here if you want to raise your hand and ask, but not putting you on the spot. Yeah, question. And I'll repeat if for some reason y'all can't hear, just tell me.
Yeah. I was curious how much autonomy they have in how their time is spent at their jobs, and if that differs between their level of like degree.
Yeah, so just repeating for everybody on Zoom. So how much autonomy do each of you have in your jobs? And do you see that differing based on bachelor degree versus PhD, even in observing other people you work with who might have different degrees from you? Sorry, I added that last part on just to broaden it a little bit. Anybody want to answer? Anybody can answer that first. All right, Cayen, you want to go, and then we'll switch over to Alex.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I would say both of my positions that I had, the downstream process development role and this current process engineering role, I have a lot of autonomy. And I want to say that's because of the management team that we have. There are some, I don't think there are any really micromanagers. As long as you kind of get your work done, they don't mind what you're doing in your day-to-day. And specifically, like, my day-to-day is like project execution and proposal writing. So as long as I meet my deadlines in terms of like testing or getting a quote out to a customer, really they leave the rest up to you. In my role specifically, though, you do have to track your hours to projects or to an administrator bucket. So it's just like, well, you kind of have to manage your time in that way, but really it's pretty nice as long as you can kind of fill your time with what you feel like you need to fill your time with.
Awesome. Thanks, Cayen. Alex, what about you?
Yeah. In fact, that may have been one of the most jarring things about transitioning from school to professional life, was how much lateral freedom I had to do what I need to do. I am very much not micromanaged. To Cayen's point, like, if I get my work done on the timeline that I set, and the agreed upon with our leadership, they don't really care how I do it, as long as they don't see me like destroying myself, right? They don't want me to compress work into a super tight time frame and burn out too quickly. But in terms of how that might relate to role and position, I really do think that depends on the organization, the leadership structure, like was mentioned. I do work with a lot of PhDs and graduates, and realistically, we have about the same level of freedom. It's just that the projects we work on kind of differ in terms of their scope, right? They may be a little more abstract in their technological focus, whereas I may specifically be trying to validate equipment or a process or something that the business has identified as the target outcome. So that's kind of the difference between the bachelor versus graduate workflow. But overall, like, the freedom to do what we need to do when we do it is pretty good.
And Alex, I think you bring up a great point, which you can just add real quick, and I'll let Alex also respond, is that every single company that all three companies that y'all work for have both PhDs and bachelors, right? And both are kind of needed and serve in different roles. And to the point that you made, Alex, about the scope of the work based on the skills that you come in with from the training from a PhD or a bachelor's, or the same with an MBA, might look different, and then might align you with different types of projects. But we've heard from other alumni that transition from undergraduate, where everything is highly structured, to working experience where nothing is really that structured, maybe other than like some set meetings a week, is quite a jarring one sometimes. Alex, do you want to comment on from your perspective?
Sure. I think I can answer from both my grad school experience and my current role. So for grad school, you have the autonomy in terms of you can do the research on your own timeline, but bounded by the goal and then the constraints set by your advisor. You work long hours and just to get the results out, not only to finish your degree, but also maybe the professor has some requirements. But then in my current role, I think you have the autonomy in terms of you can do whatever you need. So my work basically comprises of two parts. First is that you have to analyze samples for drug substance and drug products in the pipeline, and then there are certain timelines for these studies. For these timelines, you definitely have to meet them, but most of the time you have more than enough time to finish them up. And other than that, you can do your own research on the side, as long as they are related to what you're doing, or you think that'll be beneficial to the department or to your team. So you're anonymous in terms of you can design the studies that you think that'll be beneficial to the team. And in a company, you have all the resources at your disposal. Not like back in grad school, maybe funding is an issue, and then you can't buy everything you need. For instance, when I was in grad school, if I have to do purification and then the column has gone bad, I have to wash it up and then revive it. But in the company, if a column goes bad, I can just buy a new one from, say, Waters or Cytiva or whatever. I can spend $5K or $10,000 in a day just with a few clicks, and no one's going to bat an eye. So it's just different perspectives.
Thanks for rubbing that in, Alex, to us academics. With fixed budgets. I'm just kidding. Okay, quick. I'm going to switch just to, we definitely have questions in the audience. I'm going to ask one of the questions that was upvoted in our Slido. For those with industry, since you all have like industry experience, can you connect something that you are doing now to something that recruiters or companies were wanting to see in potential internship or employment opportunities before you started your full-time job? And Alex, this might go to something you brought up earlier, which is that career fair interaction. So how do y'all connect what you are doing now to something that a recruiter or a company might be looking for when they're looking for interns, looking to hire you? And that kind of broadly gets to, how did you translate what you did as a chemical engineer to getting the job that you're doing now? And we'll start, maybe Alex. Yeah, Alex Page, you want to start with that? Because that kind of circles back to your career fair experience.
Yeah, I can jump in. It's a really good question. And I think I'm going to be pulling a little bit from some of the campus recruiting that I've done with Gore in terms of like questions that they ask and how we focus on interviewing. But the big thing that helped me in my career fair interactions was being able to comfortably talk at a level of technical depth that showcased I knew what I was talking about, right? Generally speaking, it's good to be able to say, like, have that quick pitch that you say, you know, I made this thing, or I made a model, or designed this system that did X and Y. But as an interviewer, or through all the interviews I've done, it's really good to be able to go, 2, 3, 4 levels deep into like the technical aspects of what you did fluently. And I do want to emphasize that being able to talk to it at a level that is easy to interpret is very, very important, and can be kind of hard to do. And so whether or not the person you're talking to has experience in the topic that you're bringing up can 100% influence how they interpret it and how it lands. But I think that's actually a specific skill set that ChemEs are trained for, is being able to talk to those topics and actually go a couple of layers down in abstraction, and be able to talk about how the fundamentals are applied. Just an example I have is mass and energy balances. Whenever I was doing my internship at the paper mill, were pretty much everything I needed to do for the job. And that ended up being the topic I brought up in my career fair interaction, and being able to tie the high level description of the project all the way down to the fundamental aspects and fundamental work that I was doing and how it tied to the ChemE courses allowed me to disambiguate that project and that language to a point where they understood it. And once I got to that level, the conversation flowed, right? Like, that's really the important thing, is you want the conversation to be smooth. Yeah, I think that's my 2 cents. Hopefully that makes sense.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Alex or Cayen, either one of you want to talk about any aspect that you feel like if you were now interviewing you when you were on the job market, like what things were you communicating? What things would you be looking for like an intern or a first job experience?
If I may, so I applied for jobs and had a chance to interview with recruiters, both as a bachelor's student and a PhD student. And I think the one common thing that I found is that the thing that the recruiters are looking for is your skill sets. As long as your skill sets match what they're looking for, you're good. No matter what kind of other things in the description there is, you'll be okay. From my point of view, when I was interviewing as a bachelor student, the questions I get asked most of are the skills and the technical questions, or the things that I studied in the class. Because even if you say have some research experience in undergrad, it won't be too extensive. You might have something that you can add to your resume. It won't be the major part. It'll be something that can showcase that you have the ability to work in the lab, and then you have the ability to think, to critical thinking. But the way that you interact with them is that you want to make sure that you want to showcase your skill sets that can attract them. And as for PhD students, it's a little bit different. You wanted to showcase that you not only have the skill sets, but also you have the ability to think, to do the execution under different circumstances. So for both bachelor students and PhD students, I think the one thing you need to look out is you have to tailor a resume to the job description, and then showcase to the recruiter that you have the skill sets to support the job that they want, and just go out there and then don't be afraid to show them that you can do the job. I think.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Okay, I think that works. I think both of you bring up some great points of also thinking about tailoring to the position, but also how do you take skills that you're doing real time in classes and labs and research experiences and internships and actually be able to talk about them, right, with specific examples and an important level of detail. I'm going to ask the one other question that was upvoted, and Cayen, I've got a specific question for you in a minute. I'm going to rephrase this question just to whoever submitted this, because we don't ever share compensation information for individuals, but the Career Center does provide compensation numbers for every company that hires any engineer out of college. So that's data you can look up on there. But kind of a broader form of this question is thinking about like what made you pick the job that you picked? Was it a competitive salary? Was it healthcare benefits? Was it location? Was it the skills that you would be able to apply? Can you just kind of each of you briefly comment on what drew you to the job that you are currently in? And you can answer that in any way that you feel comfortable answering. Maybe Cayen, we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, sounds good. So I guess when I look for a position, I'm looking for like pretty good personal life balance. I want to be able to do my own things, but I'm also looking for a challenge, and actually I want to be interested in what I'm working on and be invested, because I think I need that kind of motivation when I'm working. One of the cool things that I guess my group kind of talks about, like they'll bring in customers and they'll talk about how they're using the systems to kind of like, how it's contributing to their process and like what patients their medications or medicines are going to. And I think that's really cool and impactful. And I would say that's like money is also very nice too, and the flexibility is also a plus. Like I'm not gonna, of course, say anything bad about that, but just all of those things combined, it gives me like pretty good fulfillment for working a job. Working a job.
Alex Page, what about on your end?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Cayen said. Work-life balance is key. Especially if you're a workaholic like I am, it's good to be at a company where they will tell you to slow down a little bit and take care of yourself. That's a really important thing. As far as compensation goes, I'm not gonna lie, I don't think medical is like the highest paying industry that a ChemE could get into. With an
It does
undergrad,
not outcompete serving on an oil rig,
it does not. It
which is
really
the highest
doesn't.
paid position.
Exactly, sub six figures if you're doing undergrad to start out in the medical field. But that being said, I do think there's a lot of opportunity to build very quickly. You know, within 5 years, it's not unheard of to be above that 6 figure mark, and to start getting the experience you need to start doing, you know, bigger, greater, harder projects. You know, something in the more in the field that like a graduate would do. But yeah, I think work-life balance is above all the biggest thing. And then I very much care about the company itself. I try to do a lot of research on the companies I'm interested in to make sure they're not, you know, doing things that, you know, are underboard. And that can be a pretty hard thing to suss out nowadays. So that's an important element for me as well.
So I have a couple of follow-up questions on that, and also Alex, for you to answer this as well. First of all, I'll comment to everybody that I will post AICHE, our American Institute for Chemical Engineering Professional Society, does an extensive salary survey yearly, and they just posted the 2023 results, which covers every industry, including what Alex was referring to about working on an oil rig, which is usually a starting salary in 6 figures and rapidly goes up, but there's also certainly other constraints associated with that. And so I'll post that so y'all have that data. And then you can look at our Career Center to see what alumni from UW, any engineering department, but chemical engineering does. To kind of pick up on a thread that several of you mentioned, what internships did you do when you were undergraduates? And was an internship a way to kind of be able to get a foot into the door at the company or the field that you ended up working in? And maybe Alex, we'll start with you on this one. If you can remember back to your undergrad time before PhD time.
Okay, sure. I did an internship when I was in my sophomore year, I remember. But it wasn't totally related to chemical engineering. I think I did it with I think you know the professor David Beck, right?
Oh yeah. So data
Yeah,
science related
data
stuff.
science. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think back at the time, what we did was an internship on marine microbial extraction and the analytical analytics. It wasn't totally what I'm doing right now, but it was a great experience. To be honest, I already forget about what I did for that internship, but it's good to put it on a resume, and then just to show. Not necessarily it has everything to do with what you're doing today. You just have to show to the future recruiter that you can do it in the industry or in different settings, in a setting other than academia. And then the other internship that I did when I was a PhD, as I mentioned, was with Regeneron, and that position was 100% match with my PhD research background in protein purification. I got that internship. I think it was really close to Christmas, and because they were looking for someone and they were not getting any candidates, and then I happened to be one of the 3 candidates out there that was still applying, and I didn't have any other plans to go out of the country or go back to home. So I think it was everything just fell into my lap to that point, and to go from PhD to industry, I think it's really important if you get an internship experience or two, because most of the time the industry people wanted to know that you can do your job outside academic settings. So I think that really helped.
Yeah, I think that's great advice to give, and sort of thinking about how you also prep transferring those skills outside of that myth that all PhDs go into academia. It really helps kind of facilitate that process as well. Cayen, can you speak to particularly this internship question, but also balancing that with undergrad research?
Yeah, I would say when I did an internship, it was only in the summertime, and I honestly would say that the experience that I gained in your lab was like very applicable to, working in the biotech space. There's a lot of cool pieces of equipment that are just hanging around in a lot of these campus buildings that I feel like, maybe some people know that they're there and you can access them, but most likely not. So I feel like if you have any kind of interest in maybe working in this kind, like a biotech space, like whether it be manufacturing or actually like some sort of drug development, working in a research lab and getting that hands-on experience with actual like processes is very useful. Yeah.
That gives me an opportunity to bring up a great stat, which is in our department, 75% of students, undergraduate students, do research, but only 10 to 15% go to postgraduate degrees, which is very standard for chemical engineering, the chemical engineering profession. So to Cayen's point, I think a lot of students do experience that research can translate in a variety of fields, but Cayen's giving the example in the biotech space from the undergrad research position to the job setting. Alex Page, I'm going to ask you an additional twist on this question, which is coming to UW as a non-traditional student, and if you want to elaborate on that, please do. How did internships factor into your undergraduate training and kind of thinking about being a non-traditional student, if that was an opportunity or something you felt hindered you, or kind of any way you want to address that?
Yeah. Yeah, what Professor Nance is talking about is I matriculated from a community college after getting my AA, and maintained essentially full-time work all the way through my undergraduate degree. And I will say that was definitely a challenging thing to do. It required me to balance time very effectively, but that actually ended up being a boon when I would describe that to possible employers. And in particularly the internship that I served in, which, by the way, I'm going to pitch, was a co-op, a 6-month co-op. So I got to push my following quarter classes off by a little bit. And I cannot tell you how highly I recommend doing that. It was a very, very, very helpful thing for me to do, because by the time my 3 months would have been up, I was actually just getting my feet under me and I was really making good headway in the projects that I had been tasked with. But I will say that the thing that I didn't anticipate switching from, just doing essentially what was retail work, some microelectronics or technical repair work, into a professional engineering role was understanding the level of risk associated with the decisions I was helping make, and figuring out how to navigate that space properly, and then understanding the soft skills required to communicate that properly, and get the right input from the right stakeholders. My 6-month co-op was at the paper mill I had mentioned. So these are big processes, giant, plug flow reactors that if something goes wrong, they could explode and it would hurt a lot of people, right? Being able to understand the risk of the work I was doing and apply the engineering skills that I had to better understand how to tackle that project in a safe way was a massive boon, or a big hurdle, and then a massive boon for the jobs I would end up taking nowadays, right? Risk management is a huge part of everything I do in the medical industry. Patients are your customer, and you actually have to spend more time than you would think defining those risk levels and knowing, what the impact of the change you're making is, and making sure you do that in a responsible way.
That's I think such a great perspective to share, and also to give the challenges, but also the opportunities that kind of came out of that experience, and the work that you did previously. I remember when Alex was in class and he was working full time. And so we definitely talked through navigating that and managing that with the ChemE course load. Also to Alex's point, if you are interested in a co-op, that is very possible in our curriculum. And so that's what the advising team and I are here to help support as well. We've got a couple of minutes left, so I just want to move to our rapid fire questions. There's definitely still questions in Slido. I will, to everybody who is in the audience, I will send those questions to our panelists. If they have a chance, they might respond, and we'll post those just so you have those answers as well. And then before I get to these rapid fire, I've taken notes on anything they have referenced that is relevant to our current undergraduate program. So classes, opportunities, things to explore. So those will go in the reflection question post. So you have those with links, anything like that, if you want to follow up on that stuff. Okay, are y'all ready for rapid fire? All right, we're going to go Alex Page, then Alju, then Cayen. We're going to go in that order. And these are 1 to 2 word responses they have to give. Okay, When you think of your ChemE degree and where you are now, what's one word that comes to mind? Alex Page.
Adaptability.
Adaptability. All right. Y'all can use the same word too if it comes up. Alex, what about you?
Versatility.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Flexibility, another synonym.
All right. Lots of abilities in there. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received? Alex Page, starting with you.
2 words. Fail often.
Nice. Okay. Fail often. Alex, what about you?
2 words. Work hard.
All right. Cayen.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Nice. Okay. I like these as you can, all of them are highly integrated together, right? Failing requires you to still work hard and to keep going. I'm just going to magically make that connection. Okay. Last one. What's a habit that contributes to your success?
Number 1 is communication.
Nice one.
I think I have 3 words. Don't put off.
All right. Don't put it off. Okay. So don't procrastinate, basically. Cayen, what about you?
Be inquisitive.
All
People
right,
appreciate
awesome.
it.
That's great. Thank y'all so much. We will definitely wrap it up there. Please feel free. They're going to hang on for a few minutes. So if you just want to come up and wave and say hi to them on the video thing, they've got these people and everybody on online. If we can give them a round of applause and thank them for their time.